Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/PettyRevenge. In today's episode, neighbor took my parking spot after I shoveled. I poured water in his windshield. Neighbors suddenly became silent at nights after unintentionally showing them the taste of their own medicine. Stop cutting across my grass. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Neighbor took my parking spot after I shoveled. I poured water in his windshield. It was a cold winter day. 8 inches of snow had fallen the night before, and the wind chill made it feel as if it were in the negatives, Fahrenheit. I drive an all-wheel drive SUV, so I have no issues getting out. My wife, on the other hand, drives a Prius, which slides with the smallest amount of moisture on the road. My car was down at the time, so we had to take my wife's car. I spent 45 minutes in the freezing cold shoveling that car out so we could get to the store. We were gone for an hour, and when we came back, our neighbor had taken the spot I had shoveled. Our apartment complex doesn't have assigned parking, but in the winter, it's understood that if you shovel a spot, it's yours. So when I saw his car in the spot I had just shoveled, I was pretty pissed. I went inside and filled 2-gallon jugs of water. Went back out and poured them on his windshield. Rinse and repeat. I must have poured about 10 gallons of water on his car. Being how cold it was already freezing by the time I poured the last gallon on. It sat like that overnight. The next morning, I got to watch as he helplessly tried to scrape all of these layers of ice off his windshield. Don't take my parking spot. My old post on this and a petty revenge. Monday night we got about a foot of snow. Bit unusual for this area, so most people didn't go into work Tuesday. This means street parking is nearly full with unmoved cars covered in snow. Yesterday afternoon I head out to pick up a few things. Shoveling out my car from the street parking spot probably took about 15 minutes. Takes a little while to move the 3,000 or so pounds of snow off and from around my car and dig a path through the snowplow's mess. The whole time I have been shoveling snow from around my car, there has been a lady waiting to take my parking spot. While there are maybe 2 or 3 empty spots on the street, all are filled with snow. So I do what I must. I put the snow shovel in my trunk and head back inside. A few years ago, we got a foot or 2 of snow in Philadelphia. I lived in the not-so-good section of West Philadelphia. People would put cones and trash cans on spots they shoveled out. One idiot had the balls to move the cones and trash cans and park in the spot. Guess who didn't have tires when they came back? My dad was petty AF. The winter of 96 foot in the Philly area. He had shoveled a spot out from the few feet of snow we got. I can't remember why his car was gone for a minute, but when he got back someone had parked in his spot. My dad was mad. So he shovels himself a new spot, and piles all the snow up on and around the car in his original spot. He then shovels the neighbors some spots and did the same thing. Couldn't even see the car when he was done. This was a great story that just got better. Dad went out of his way to dump on this spot stealer and just happened to help his neighbors in the process, lol. Years ago, working for digital in the 80s on one of the online forums, somebody told the tale of an asshole landlord they had in Chicago. When they left the apartment in winter, they had a waterbed that they needed to empty, which they did by using a hose as a siphon. They ran the pipe out of the window and onto the landlord's car. Apparently, the car was entombed for the rest of the winter. In Pittsburgh, we've mostly all agreed on the parking chair system. If you shovel it, you put a folding chair or something similar in the spot. If you're someone looking for a spot, you do not violate the sanctity of the parking chair. Neighbors suddenly became silent at nights after unintentionally showing them the taste of their own medicine. So I was living in an apartment, having a neighbor on right and one on top. Both neighbors had kids that made a lot of noise during day and night. I didn't really have a problem with noises at day, they were kids and it was understandable. But really, who the hell runs and screams up to 3 a.m.? So, several times I wrote in the building WhatsApp group that please keep your children quiet at night as I and everyone else needs to sleep and wake up early. I got no answers, or if I did, it was their parents telling they are kids and they will try, but cannot promise anything. Fast forward to my birthday. One of my friends gave me this amazing soundbar, and when I got home I was too excited to hear some music from it. It was like 12 a.m. and I really wasn't thinking about any revenge or something. Just wanted to try this new soundbar and didn't notice it's too late. I played my rock playlist with a high volume and meanwhile on my PC trying to figure out its features. At around 2:30 a.m. the same neighbor, top floor, came and knocked my door. It was then, before opening the door, that I realized what time is it. I opened the door and saw it's him trying to ask to keep it quiet. Before he starts speaking I told sorry, I didn't notice the time and turned it off. Didn't mention his kids or anything. He appreciated and went. From that day none of those two neighbors' kids made any noise at night. Not a single day. Like their parents had all control over the kids to keep them quiet at night, but didn't feel necessary until they felt the other neighbors can also make midnight noises. Only if I knew this earlier I would buy the soundbar way earlier. I live in a duplex and had new neighbors moved in with kids. These kids were loud and super energetic. Constantly stomping up and down their stairs and banging doors that I can literally feel my walls shaking. The worst part? They were constantly banging a basketball against our shared wall. This would go on the whole day till the kids tired out at night. Spoke to their mother about the noise level and asked her if they can at least stop banging the ball against our shared wall. She basically said they're just kids being kids and I should mind my own business. Well, that night I stayed up until 3 a.m. and sat a few feet from our shared wall and started pitching a tennis ball hard against it. I crocheted a little pocket with a rope around it so I wouldn't have to go and fetch the ball in case it bounced too far off. Sat there pitching for about 10 to 15 minutes and all of a sudden I heard banging from the other side of the wall. I knew I had achieved my goal then, so I stopped. The banging stopped. Next day, the kids started playing with their basketball outside. Perfectly fine for me. A week later their dad installed a basketball hoop for them outside. No more banging from either of us. Similar thing happened to me. Upstairs neighbors were in a band and practiced way too late on weeknight. I didn't love it on weekends, but I only really cared on work nights. We sleep with our TV on, so since I'm a corner unit, noise in my apartment can only be heard upstairs. I started turning on my TV loud enough to block out the noise he was making. I can sleep through certain shows almost no matter how loud it is. Eventually one night he came down and said the TV was too loud. I told him it was only on to block out the noise he was making. He said, "Man, I never realized it was that loud. I always just assumed you were trying to hassle me." He never played after 10 p.m. again. I knowingly fixed a neighbor just like that. He liked getting together with friends and party at night, but I'm a morning person, so about half an hour after everyone left his place it was time for me to get up and start my morning with a nice rock playlist at decent volume. Took him 2 weekends to realize his mistake and kept it quiet from then on. Most of the time people just don't realize how sounds travel through paper-thin walls. Living in a row house. Neighbors that shared my bedroom wall were fighters, then lovers, both loudly. I put my stereo speakers to the wall. When they were fighting, I'd play the Imperial March and the music from the space battles. When they were loving, I'd play Bolero. They finally found out what I was doing and swapped rooms with their kids. I warned my mom they were noisy and offered her my stereo if it bothered her. Seemed they never made much noise after that. Stop cutting across my grass. We live in the end house on our street, which has a slight curve. For almost the last year, I've noticed that twice a day, on the way to and from school, the same teenager cuts across our front lawn. I asked him to stop ages ago, but he has not. It's beginning to leave a noticeable path of thinned-out grass from being walked on excessively. The kids went back to school yesterday after the summer and I noticed him do it again in the morning. That's when I decided that rather than confront him, I would exact my revenge. You see, said teenager is very much into their fashion, they always have really expensive clothes and, more importantly, trainers on. One section of his chosen route we have been planning a flower bed. I decided, today is that day. I dug out the section and put down the new loose compost, including manure of course. I then left my hosepipe squirting water on this patch for a few hours to suitably moisten the soil. To finish off, a scattering of grass clippings on the top. Sure enough, boy goes to cut across our grass to find himself ankle deep in wet mud and manure. I was pissing myself laughing and had to compose myself before walking out and profusely apologizing to him while holding 2 plants to put into my new flower bed. Edit, added the sentence about asking him to stop. I forgot to add that detail and it's been asked a few times already. I was gonna suggest a motion-activated sprinkler, but this better. I might do that if he decides a new path through our garden is his new route. Kids used to cut through our backyard from middle school and it didn't bother me or my parents. But one day, there was about 18 inches of snow in the ground. It covered up the small pond we had in the corner of the backyard. 3 larger boys were chasing one smaller boy through our yard, screaming and threatening him. Well, the smaller kid being chased knew there was a pond in the corner and went around it. The 3 bullies didn't go around and fell right in. It was only 3 feet deep, but they got soaked and the little kid got away. This was the issue with my parents' corner lot, except jerks would drive over the low-sloping curve and cut across the lawn once a year. Mom's new rock garden that ripped out a kid's oil pan stopped that. As I currently own a house on a corner lot and have teenagers and lazy parents create a path each year, I can appreciate your plight. Years ago, my dad had a similar problem. He asked nicely. Asked a few times. Finally, he took out his camera. He is a retired photographer, so it is one of those big-ass cameras. He started pretending to take pictures. There was no film in the camera, lol. The kids asked what he was doing, he looked at them and said evidence. They never came back. I had a friend years ago with the same problem. She bought a beautiful house on the corner. Unfortunately, it was also in a HOA. All the kids in the neighborhood cut through the corner of her yard to and from the bus stop, even though there was a perfectly good sidewalk. She asked them repeatedly to please stop. They didn't. She wasn't allowed to put up a fence or use large rocks. She found some spiky thorny native plant, I don't remember what, that grew only to about 4 to 5 inches high. Just high enough to shred ankles. The cutting stopped soon after. There was a guy on here a few months back that had the same issue and he started turning the hose on the kid. Over time the kid enjoyed the attention and would just have conversation with the dude while getting hosed down. I wonder what happened to that blossoming friendship. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share and we will see you in the next video.